Thanks. I'm really happy to be talking to you today, since, as you've just heard, I haven't spoken for a week. I just finished a week-long voice cleanse, and I wasn't sure if my voice was going to work very well, if it was going to crack like a 13-year-old boy or something like that, but it seems to be working, so let me tell you about what I've learned. First, I want to talk about my general philosophy about big, hairy, audacious goals and how we can incorporate them into our lives for self-awareness and self-improvement. This year, I set out to do 3 big, hairy, audacious goals, or BHAGs. The first was a 7-day food cleanse, where I cut out all food as taking away one of my basic human needs of air, water, food, and shelter, to put my life in perspective and to appreciate the little things I take for granted. The second BHAG I did was running the Grand Slam. As was mentioned, I'm a runner. I run about an hour a day, and I set out to do the Grand Slam Ultra Series, which is a set of the 4 original 100-mile races in the United States, and running them all within 11 weeks. I did it in 109 hours, which, if you break it out, is about 24 hours per race, except for the last one, which was super hard, had 29,000 feet of climbing, was at high altitude. It's crazy, but I was able to test the limits of my endurance and have some of the most cathartic moments of my life. Both of these BHAGs were painful, physical, and transformative experiences. And so for my next BHAG, I wanted to do something along the lines of sensory deprivation, specifically not talking. And we talk all the time and take it for granted. So I knew that not talking for a week would require extreme discipline and concentration. I also knew that I'd have to incorporate this into my normal life, as opposed to going away to a meditation retreat for a week or something like that, in order to get the real experience that I wanted. So, not talking was actually really frustrating. Just the simple fact that I'm standing here today probably tells you that I like to talk. And I have to talk a lot in my job. I'm a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, and I hear a lot of people talk and pitches and calls all week. I'm on the board of a games company in Finland called Next Games, and we had a board call with people around the world. And it's really hard to do a board call when you can't talk. But what I did was I emailed the CEO in advance and told him that I would email him questions as they came up, and he read them aloud. And it worked pretty well. I'm also pitched a few times a day by entrepreneurs who are raising money, similar to Shark Tank, but in real life. And I had a small whiteboard, and I would just write down questions on it. And it worked pretty well. What I found is that communication became pretty efficient. I was very terse in what I wrote. And I typically wrote in about 140 characters, partially because my whiteboard was small, but also because I'm a big fan of Twitter. And I think you're able to say what you want to say in less words in many cases. Actually, my Twitter is @SanFranciscoVC, so if you want to follow me, you can follow me. It's a little plug. I also found that people talk less when I was doing the voice fast. And more specifically, they were very to the point, which was great. And sometimes they actually were able to look at my gesticulations and figure out what I was going to say, and I didn't have to complete my sentence. Also, I found I was a better listener. By not talking, I had to listen more. And I always tried to listen more and be a better listener when it comes to personal and professional relationships. Because when you really listen to somebody, you're telling them you appreciate them and what they're saying. Also, better listening is better business. One of my business partners always says, you should have big ears and a small mouth. And what he's saying is that people often negotiate against themselves when it comes to business. Knowing when to be silent in business is actually a pretty big skill. I think we can all appreciate the importance of listening to leadership skills as well. I also found that I had a much less stressful week. Generally, it was just quieter. As I said, people talked to me less, but also I didn't hear the sound of my own voice. And on average, we speak about 15,000 words per day. That's a lot, and there's a lot of noise. And there have been studies that show that noise pollution activates the amygdala portion of your brain, which causes a release of stress hormones. There have also been studies that show that a few minutes of prolonged silence throughout the day are much more relaxing than listening to soft music, as shown by decreased blood flow in the brain and lower blood pressure. I think the most stressful part of my whole week, though, was trying to figure out how to rehearse this talk without actually talking. It's really hard. But I had great sleep, and there have been studies that show that a few minutes of silence throughout the day lead to lower insomnia and much better sleep. I found myself alone with my thoughts throughout the day, and one of the hardest things was actually not talking to yourself. I don't talk to yourself. I don't talk to myself. Yes, you do. No, you don't. We all talk to ourselves, even though we may not realize it. But it's really, you're very acutely aware of it when you do a voice fast. I also found that my other senses were heightened. I could really hear what people were saying, both literally and metaphorically. I could also sometimes see what they were about to say before they said it by looking at the nonverbal communications and their facial expressions. I was also really aware of my own breathing. You know, we take about 20,000 breaths a day. And when you really focus on your breathing, it's pretty relaxing. It's sort of like a yoga class, but without the stretching. And if you're like me, you probably need to stretch more because I'm totally inflexible. There are also some real medical benefits to voice fasting. Extensive studies have shown that a few hours of prolonged silence lead to brain cell regeneration in the hippocampus part of your brain, the part that's responsible for learning and memory. Also, when you're awake but you don't have external stimuli, your brain goes into default mode, which basically allows yourself to process the experiences you've had and convert them into learnings and key takeaway. It's an important part of your day. So I don't know if I'll do a voice fast again. Probably not. It was really hard and frustrating for a lot of people. But I had some key takeaways. I became a better communicator in many ways. I was better at listening. I had a much less stressful week. I slept great. I relied on my other senses. And I knew there's some real medical benefits. But more than anything, I was really excited to just set a goal and achieve it. I think it's a really important thing that we do in our lives. For many people, their goals are to pay their rent or send their kids to school. For others, goals are less defined, and sometimes they've already been accomplished. In some ways, these types of BHAGs are a first world person's problem of manufacturing pain in order to gain some wisdom. For me, it's about setting a goal and achieving it as part of my lifelong goal of personal improvement. I highly recommend setting a BHAG in one of your lives and see where it takes you. Thank you.